Welcome to the Outlier's journey, where we'll explore the human stories of inspiring paths to success. We do it in the African American and Caribbean immigrant communities. Hi, my name is John Seaton. I've always been fascinated with folks who manage to overcome adversity and somehow achieve success despite the odds. My guest today is Letita Martin, who is Chief of Staff, Operations, Talent, and Culture at Cisco. She describes herself as an innovative storyteller who drives people, processes, and workforce planning. Now, Letita has an interesting journey into tech coming from the creative arts. And although her life story did not begin with adversity, Letita did experience a number of significant challenges along the way that she had to figure out how to overcome. So, what we'll explore is how did Letita recognize these challenges and what were the ways that she found to conquer these challenges? So, these are the questions that we want to explore. So, Letita, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Hope that intro did you justice.
Yeah, I was a little surprised.
All right.
I was like, oh, I got an intro?
You got an intro. That's right. Everybody gets an intro. So, the first question that I wanted to ask you is why did you want to tell your story?
I think that what drives me as far as in sharing my story is I always think about when I was younger, wishing that there was a little bit more transparency
Okay.
and leaving some breadcrumbs, for others so that they can have an opportunity to, not even so much an opportunity, but that they see that there is a way out.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why to me it's important to share my story. I typically don't share my story unless I think it's going to help others.
Okay. So you think that this could, as I said in the intro, help and inspire others who were out there with you?
Yeah, that's the goal. I'm hoping so.
One of the things that I like to ask my guests is, we're about overcoming adversity, and it implies that you've reached a level of success if you've overcome adversity. And I always like to ask the question, how do you define success?
Whew. I feel like success is really individualized to every person. I think at one point in time, I defined success of like, yeah, when I have like, I'm making this much and I have like a house, a decent car, and, can just sustain myself. But I think that over years and just, growing up a little bit, I feel like success is more defined in what is, and I don't know if I have the right words for this, but what is okay with my inner soul? Like, where am I at a place to where when I wake up, I'm like, you know what? I am completely okay with where I'm at, what I'm doing, who's around me, who's in my life, the experiences that I'm having. Like, I am okay. And I think that when I think of defining success, it's when you get to that place where it's like, what I have is enough. Even though I may want more, I may want some other things I may want to add on, but where I'm at, like, it's enough.
So it's more like it's more like an inner
things.
peace and satisfaction rather than external.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't come from things.
Yeah.
It doesn't come from the stimulation.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, I like that. So where are you joining us from today?
I am joining you from Raleigh, North Carolina.
Okay. North Carolina, Raleigh. I know a lot about that. I've spent some time in that state. I can't say I know a lot about it, but I spent a little bit of time there. Tell us a little bit about yourself right now in terms of your work situation, your family life, because what I want to do is I want to contrast that with we're going to go back a bit, right? Way back and start and figure out how you got to where you are. But to appreciate where you are, I want to appreciate the journey. We want to understand where you are right now.
Yeah. So actually, as stated already, I'm at Cisco. I've actually shifted. I have not updated that from my chief of staff role a bit. However, I am still very much people focused and workforce planning focused. Been at Cisco for going on, I think it's 8 or 9 years now. So started out as a contractor, and honestly, it was interesting. I never thought that I would land. Oh, I'll say, I'm not going to say I never thought that I would land. Let's just say I wasn't for sure how I would land at a company like Cisco. I thought that I needed to be technical,
Right.
and I wasn't. And I remember one day just the other job that I had, going, sitting at my desk, putting a certain amount of a dollar bill on my desk, and just thinking to myself, like, I'm going to do this, and it's going to be at a tech company, and I'm going to start making, at least at a minimum, this is going to be my starting point.
Mm-hmm.
And just kind of focusing on that. And somehow or another, they let me in the door. No, but I love what I do because, again, even the work that I do, even in the role that you mentioned with my previous chief of staff role, what drives me is enabling people to be able to do their best and work in the area of their strength, and really work at the optimal level. So if I can remove those barriers, um, then that's what I do. So it's very, very much like why I tell my story.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about helping people be able to realize their full selves and their full potential.
Gotcha. Okay. So we have an appreciation for where you are today. You never thought you'd get into tech, but here you are now, successful working at Cisco. So let's go back. Let's go back to where you grew up. Now, I understand you weren't born in this country, which I wouldn't be able to tell. There's a lot of things that I think will surprise people as we go through this conversation. But tell me a little bit about your beginnings, where you were born.
Yeah. So my father was in the
Mm-hmm.
military. And so I was born in Panama,
Wow.
Panama City. So, Central South America. Um, and came here to the States after I was born. I don't remember anything from there, but moved to Rapid City, South Dakota after Panama. And we were in Rapid City, South Dakota for 12
Wow.
years.
So, so, so,
Yes.
so grew up in South Dakota. Did you have siblings? What was your household like?
Yes. I had two biological
Okay.
sisters during that time, and mother, father, both in the household. Again, my father was in the military. My mom during that time, well, from what I remember when I started to be able to remember, was an LPN. I do remember her working at a nursing
Okay.
home and taking us
Mm-hmm.
there. With her sometimes. And then she used to also do in-home care. I remember during the summer times when we'd be out of school, she'd take me and my sisters, put us in a car. She got us these little workbooks that we had to
Mm-hmm.
do while she was handling care, cleaning, cooking, taking care of this elderly lady. And we just like played and we worked through our little workbooks that she gave us to make sure we were ready for the next grade
Mm-hmm.
when we went. And yeah, that's what I remember.
Now, you also talked about the fact that your home was a pretty welcoming home. You had refugees living there at some point in time, right?
Yeah. Yeah. My parents, and I say I inherited the same thing. My parents took everybody in.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when we moved to South Dakota, I can't remember what age I was, but my cousin ended up moving and living with us. She was probably about 10 or 12 years old, somewhere between 10 and 12 years old at the time. And she lived with us all the way through when she moved out in her 20s. And we also had some refugees stay with us. I remember too, we also, there was this house. It's so crazy. I even remember some of these places. There was this place called Star Village. I don't know if it still exists there, but I even remember us. Eventually, there was a family that was too big. We couldn't take them in. And so we ended up getting people to donate furniture and all these type of things to set up the house for them and everything like that. And we had a place for them to stay and the rent and stuff was taken care of. And so things like that. And then we also, probably the person I remember the most was a lady from London who lived with us. I remember her because she was vegetarian.
Mm-hmm.
And I tasted a salad she made one day that had peanuts in it. And that's when I realized I didn't like peanuts in salad. Um, and I remember her because she used to date this guy that went to our church. And I just remember them like outside the house flirting with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a kid at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So, you're like in the blinds like this, like, ooh,
Right,
you
right,
know,
right, right.
but I loved it because it was just a window out into the world that I didn't quite have necessarily being there, even though I didn't realize that once I got to the East Coast, that most people who look like me didn't have the window into my world.
Right. We're going to get to
Yeah.
that. That's why I want to lay the foundation for your experience in
Yeah.
Rapid City, South Dakota. Now, I did a little bit of Googling, which I usually like to do before these interviews. Do you know what the percentage of Black folks in Rapid City, South Dakota
Ooh,
is, at least with the most recent census?
I have no idea. And I'm imagining since I can't remember if the Air Force Base shrunk a little bit or if it closed completely there, but
I'll give you the number. It's 1.6%.
is it four?
It's one
No. Okay.
1.6%, at least with the latest. So
Sorry, y'all.
that's going to speak to some of the things we're going to talk to about later, some points I want to get to. But the community that you grew up in, I've done 12 of these interviews so far. It's way different than anyone else's origin story because you grew up in a white community and a diverse
Yeah.
community, not only a white community, but a Native American community as well. So
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. Honestly, I mean, I thought it was normal life. I mean,
Uh-huh.
it was a lot of it was diversity. What was interesting is so my community itself, like the school I went to, there was, of course, mostly white.
Hmm.
And then the next population was probably, I want to say Native American, and then it was Black people.
Right.
Um, and so that was like one experience. But then I had a church experience, and the pastor or the bishop of the church at that particular time was from Evansville, Illinois, which is right outside of Chicago, Illinois. And because the Air Force Base was there, and it was like almost every Black person that was in the Air Force went to that church.
Okay.
And so that church was a really good mixture. I want to say it was probably about 40% Black, and then you had a handful of Native Americans. I won't say a handful. I'll probably say about 15% Native Americans, and then whatever that percentage left of Caucasians. And I do remember we used to go on at our church. Part of our outreach was to go out to the Native American reservations
Mm-hmm.
and pick up the kids and stuff like that for church. We would go there, cook them full breakfast. I mean, the whole shabam. I didn't even get that type of breakfast at home, but man. And just like we were all just really incorporated. It wasn't, I didn't think about race or like
Yeah.
segregation or
Yeah.
like none of that stuff just came to mind. It was really interesting.
Yeah. And I guess even though it was 1.6% Black or very low Black population, your church had a lot of other African Americans
Yeah.
in it. So you really didn't feel that isolated. But then you went to powwows, you knew about cowboys, you were
Yeah,
hunting,
rodeos,
rodeos, right?
everything, Indian reservations. I had the experience of, I remember in school, we had like a ski trip.
Mm-hmm.
We've had, like, I went camping with friends. And I thought all of this was just, it was normal to
Normal,
me.
right.
Like being outdoors and, the hiking and all that stuff. And yeah.
But then something happened, and this is what I want to get to. That's why I want to lay the foundation of you had this very hospitable home you grew up in. You had a very diverse experience with other types of people. You basically had a Andy Griffith show, Leave It to Beaver type of lifestyle, right? But then a shift happens after those 12 years where your dad says we're moving to Greensboro, North Carolina. So before we
Yeah.
even get to the move, tell me about how you felt when you heard that.
Oh my gosh. So I had visited Greensboro a couple times because my dad's parents lived there. So I remember maybe 2 summers being out there. But I really didn't have a whole concept of it was like mostly like with family. So when we found out that we were going to move because my grandfather had a stroke and my grandmother needed more help because they were aging, naturally I was sad just like any other kid, but I was also petrified.
Why? Why were you petrified?
Well, because it was interesting because even though I had an African American community around me, like being in South Dakota, I thought like the rest of the Black community was what I saw on TV. And so I remember like crying a little bit, like, I'm gonna get shot when I go to school, or, being scared of like, oh my gosh, there's gonna be all these fights and all this violence and all these things around me. And so yeah, that was a perception that I had, and I had to wrestle with all the way until I got to the East Coast, and and I understand some of the it helps put things in perspective too, of when I hear certain things now, that that allows me to engage and have conversation with people who may also feel the same. But it really is interesting that what you see on TV, because even though like I watch like the Hustables and like the
Yeah.
Living Singles and all this
Yeah.
kind of other stuff, it felt like that was only in my small world.
Mm-hmm.
It felt like outside of the world, it was going to be like New Jack City,
Mm-hmm.
Boys in the Hood. Higher. What was
Is that higher
the
learning?
joint Spike Lee
Yeah.
did? Was it Higher
Might
Learning?
have been.
Yeah, like it. Like I thought that
Lean on me.
was, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like that was the perception outside of my own sphere.
And I think it's interesting that you bring this up and want to unpack it a little bit, right? So, from your perspective, being in that community and having that filter of most of the media that you saw gave you this negative perception of the community that you were about to move to, you can sort of understand that, others of different races who have this preconceived notion or prejudice, say what it is, um, it's based on what they're exposed to. So
100%.
it's interesting to
Yeah.
take look at it from the other side of the coin, especially being an African American woman who grew up in a unique atmosphere, I'll say, right, because of South Dakota and everything like that. Um,
Yeah.
so let's talk about when you actually move. Then what is your initial experience, and then we'll go through the story.
Yeah, so once we moved, actually it was I remember it was November. I want to say 95 or 96. I can't even remember. But when we actually did move, I remember us getting to the townhome that we were going to move into and everything like that. And I was actually a little happy because like they were kind of in this like little cluster, and the girl who had came out because she saw that a new family was
Right.
moving in, she was actually Hispanic. So I was like, oh my God, we got some diversity around here. And yeah, so I started feeling like, okay, and me and her were the same age. We were actually in the same grade and stuff like that. And so going to school, I felt a little bit better. But, walking in, just kind of seeing so many Black
Mm-hmm.
kids in one space, I was kind of a little bit like, but then as I started getting into the classroom and I started, talking to people and making friends and getting into sports and all these different things, I started realizing like, wow, we're not different.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there are a lot of, now I think there was when you're in public schools, there's the ends of every
Yeah.
spectrum. So you had some of those who may have grown up in the projects and stuff like that, but even they were welcoming, and I had good relationships with them all the way to the ones who always wore labels to school and stuff. And I was just kind of that girl in the middle. Because I never really experienced, I never was in cliques. So I never did the clique thing, even like growing up. And so I never did the cliques. I just didn't understand it because of the way that I grew up. So seeing some of those things were very different for me, but I never felt like I needed to be in that box where I had to start choosing what type of people that I talked to or engaged with. I always felt like people are people.
Mm-hmm.
But it did break down the stereotypes for me that, Black people outside of my previous sphere were like all violent and I need to be scared and, have to always watch my back and in those type things. So it was an eye opener. And that's actually my best friend, even still to this day. I was introduced to HBCUs from her, like hanging around her family all the time. I used to stay the night like for weeks at a time during the summertime, and she had like older sisters, and one of them was getting ready to go to college. So that introduced me into the whole world of just like HBCUs and colleges, and
Right.
something me and my parents had never talked about, and I never knew was even an option. if that makes
Now, did you
sense.
get any pressure for being this black girl from South Dakota? Did you talk any different? You know.
Oh yeah. I still do it sometime. Like just what I did, like I still do it sometime. Where it's like I'm singing my words. Like I remember I use and I still do this, like if one of my friends are looking at me too long or something, I'm like, what? And I used to be like, why do you always sing your words? I'm like, what are you talking about?
Is that a South Dakota thing?
It
Really?
was. It
Okay.
was a little bit. It was a little bit, but I think too, and I think that I don't know. Some people say I do have a little bit of a Southern accent now, and some people say I don't. But just how I talked, it was always like, "Oh, you talk like a white girl." So I used to get teased
Yeah.
about that a little bit. Honestly, though, it didn't bother me. I didn't. To me, I couldn't hear my accent or not or non-accent in my own voice.
Mm-hmm.
I just knew that this was my voice and this is the way that I talk. As long as you can understand me. But yeah, I mean, it was a point of some people would poke fun at.
Okay. All
So
right. So we're still in the Leave It to Beaver or I don't know, whatever that family was. That was Americana, right? It sounds like your story's still pretty good. So when I initially spoke with you about this, I was like, okay, life's pretty good. Where's the adversity, right? So when you went into
yeah.
school, you got into sports, you did all kind of things there. So that was cool too, right? You were into a lot of activities.
I was really into a lot of activities. I think probably, I'm trying to think. Now, I'll probably say that more started in high school where I started becoming a little bit more self conscious of stuff. But yeah, I was into a lot of
Mm-hmm.
activities. And um, I guess two things I would say where some of the adversity comes in is, when you're at that stage, again, I was in middle
Yeah.
school when I made that transition. And so there is a space you're still naive on a lot of
Sure.
things because I was so when I was in South Dakota, because I had such a strong sense of community and family and extended families and all these things there, I was looked out after. Not helicopter parents or anything like that. I'm not talking about my parents, but like we always looked out for each other just in our community.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a lot of like big brothers and big sisters and stuff like that, that if something was going on or something wasn't right, they were like, hey, come on,
Right.
from a protection standpoint. But getting to the East Coast, all I had was my family, and my parents are working all the time, and and my sisters, they're trying to find their
Mm-hmm.
footing and stuff. And two of my sisters went ahead of me because they graduated early and they knew we were coming, so they moved maybe a year or two before. But yeah, when I was in sports and stuff, I thought I was having that same experience. And so one of my coaches, and during the time in middle school, we used to always he used to always coach like in the summertime to keep students
Mm-hmm.
active and like, continuing to build and stuff. And he did everything from middle school all the way through like high school. So he was like helping to train people who
Right.
want to like go to the Olympics
Mm-hmm.
and stuff. And so he was training me a lot and some other students as far as like, during the summertime. What I didn't know is that he was looking at me a lot differently than what he was looking at other
Mm-hmm.
students. Um, and I distinctly just remember a time where I was in middle school during the time, and I used to always have this thing of like, I'm gonna be a businesswoman, uh, like one day type thing.
Mm-hmm.
So every Wednesday, I would dress up in like a suit to
Mm-hmm.
school. It's probably so corny, but I would dress up like really nice. It'd be like some type of like cute suit or something like that. And I remember we were both passing each other in the hallway, and I remember he looked at my nails at the time, and it had my name on both of one of my nails. And so I remember him saying, "Oh yeah, you think you're gonna be something one day? You think you're gonna see your name in lights one day?"
Mm-hmm.
And I remember just instinctively just being like, "Yep,"
Mm-hmm. Of course.
and didn't think anything of it and kept it moving. But the fact that he was so attentive to details should have been a red flag. But to someone who's, 12, 13 years old, you're not thinking
Right.
anything of
Right. Exactly. So the reason I want to establish your beginnings, right? Because your beginnings starting in South Dakota, your strong family support, and then the changes that start to occur once you get to uh, North Carolina is something that's notable, because I think even what's ironic, where we're about to go in terms of a story, the view that you had of North Carolina when you were in South Dakota almost came true in a way as we talk about some of the things going forward, right? Which is the
Yeah.
ironic part of the story. So, talk about when things started to turn for you. Things started to turn negative.
Yeah. Yeah. So I remember distinctly, we were um, it was the end of the summer. And so that particular coach, who also, so let me distinguish this. He was a coach at a middle school that I went to. Um, but again, he coached a lot of students. So in the summer, we were doing a end of summer cookout at his house, and he was supposed to be dropping me off to my house after the whole cookout and everything like that. And what I think is interesting about it is there actually, I said earlier that I didn't actually necessarily have the protection that I had when I was in South Dakota. I do distinctly remember about that moment. One of the girls was getting picked up, and I think her dad picked up on something too,
Mm-hmm.
and was like, "You want me to go ahead and take you home?" When he
Mm-hmm.
grabbed his daughter, and I was a little um, hesitant at first, because I was like, well, I don't want somebody else to bring me home, and my parents think that this person's supposed to, bring
Right.
me home type thing. I was like, no, I'm okay.
Mm-hmm.
But there was something in the back of my mind that was like, hmm,
Mm-hmm.
where you don't know. But anyways, so I remember everyone had left, and I was getting ready, like I was grabbing my stuff so that he can go ahead and drop me off. And then I remember him asking me, he was like, hey, come here. And this was like in his living room, like close, like by the front window. And he asked me, he was like, do you know how to kiss?
Hmm.
And I'm like, huh? I'm
Red flag. Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, of course I know how to kiss,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And I'm kind of like laughing at it a little bit, because, you know, and not like laughing like he said something funny, but almost like that
Yeah,
nervous
yeah.
and still trying to be nice a little
Mm-hmm.
bit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, yeah. Now at this time, I'm 14 years old. So let me just,
Yeah, give
so
some
that I'll mark
context.
that
Yeah.
timeline.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm 14 years old, and he's like, no, like really kiss. And I'm like, I don't know. I think so. Like, I don't know. So then he's like, come here. So then he's like kiss like this. So he kisses me. Um, and then pretty much from there, it was like, so what he was saying is like, oh, there's different ways to kiss. So let me teach you these different ways to kiss that can make someone feel like these
Mm-hmm.
different types of ways. And so it started there. And then within that probably like year time frame, but it happened very quickly. It went from let me show you how to kiss to let me show you what oral sex is and what it feels like to let me show you what sex actually feels like.
And so during this
And
time,
his
you hadn't talked to anybody about it?
No, I was
Mm-hmm.
nervous. There was still this, again, like the naiveness in
Yeah, and
me.
he was
There
power
was still
tripping,
this
right? So,
Yeah, there was still this naive piece that was like, maybe he has my best interest at heart, because he kind of set it up like, um, I don't want you to get to high school and then you get the reputation of being a tease or something like that because you don't know what to do. So let me teach you what to do so that when that time comes, you know what to do in the
mm-hmm.
bedroom. And yeah, so it went from there. And I remember then it was like, I think he was like trying to have fun or make things exciting. Maybe he was trying to, when I think back on it, maybe he was trying to push himself to the edge to see like what was possible that he could probably get away with. So there was one time we went to one of his friends' apartments and ended up being intimate there. There was one time where it was in the car of his
He's
driveway, and
careless. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
one of his friends happened to come, and he's like, "Shh, get down." And so like we're like low in the car, and you know, And so, yeah, just like reflecting back on it, it's like, man, that was really twisted, but that changed the whole dynamics of my life because um, though he claimed he was teaching me,
Mm-hmm.
to have sex, I think it is interesting that he left out some pretty big lessons, like what happens to you emotionally
Mm-hmm.
when you like someone and you start to engage in that type of interaction. Um, and that impacted me for a very long
So
time.
how did this affect your decision making in future relationships that you had?
Yeah, what I thought was interesting is I've never been the type of female that always had to be in any type of
Mm-hmm.
relationship. I've always kind of been one of those females where it's like, I have to really, really like you to get in a relationship. And I'm kind of cool because I'm doing my little sports over here. I'm doing my performing over here with like dancing and singing and stuff like that. But when I got to high school, so timeline of this. So when I got to high school, I was still 14, getting ready to turn 15. There was a guy who liked me, and I was kind of like, he was really cute, but I
Mm-hmm.
was like, and after some time of him pursuing me, I finally was like, all right, fine, we'll get in a relationship and everything like that. So we got in a relationship, but I remember the second time that we hung out, we went to his house and I remember his parents weren't there, and it was just me and him sitting on the couch. And I remember hearing like the coach in my back of my head of almost this lesson of like, this is what you're supposed to do. And so, in a very awkward way, I looked at him and I was like, hey, do you want to have sex?
Hmm.
And of course, a guy at that age, he's like, yeah, not knowing that I really didn't want to.
Right,
I
because you
felt like
were
that's what
conditioned as part of your
I felt like that's what
parents.
I
Yeah,
was supposed to
yeah.
do. And so I did what I was supposed to do. And that turned into a 5-year
Mm-hmm.
roller coaster
Mm-hmm.
and very tumultuous.
Yeah. So it sounds like this coach kicked off a real bad situation for you. And as we talk about the next 5 years, um, you can see the negative impact of that experience on you. Now, during this whole time, I have to ask, because people are probably wondering, what was your relationship with your home life at that point with your parents?
Um, Everything was fine at that
Hmm.
time. Things took a turn when that relationship started in high school.
Okay.
Things took a turn in the home life.
Right. So this person that, I don't know if it was this one or the next one, so you have to remind me. Um, there was some bad company, I'll say, right, associated with a couple of individuals that you have relationships with. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was one of the main relationships where that happened, where I was involved in a guy, and we have a child, to this day. He grew up to be a great kid,
Okay.
thank God, but um, it was a lot of cheating happening within the relationship. He had a brother that was like 15 years older than him, and so his brother was out in the streets a lot, doing a lot
Hmm.
of, drug dealing and all these type of different things. And so he was into it with his friends. Um, and then I found myself slowly starting to get pulled in. And so this is when I made the statement earlier about the coach not teaching what happens to you emotionally or what happens to your heart emotionally with stuff like this. One thing that I'll say, and I'll also set this as a foundation, is that when I grew up seeing nothing but married couples. So I grew up seeing nothing but healthy relationships. And if they were unhealthy, I didn't have a window
Hmm.
into it being unhealthy or being untoxic. And so when you see that growing up, though most people would think it's a positive thing, when I went into dating this individual, I didn't know the premise of being a girlfriend versus being a wife. So I'm acting like this is my life partner.
Yeah.
When in reality, he's treating me like I'm his girlfriend and I'm an option.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that
Decided.
creates a whole, yeah, that creates a whole different level of toxicity within itself. But anywho, so it wasn't really this period where I was like really withholding or anything. It was like I was open, like this is my man. I'm supposed to treat him like, he's like husband and, be there through thick and thin. And next thing you know, I find myself skipping school,
Mm-hmm.
skipping classes, in more fights than what I even thought that I would be in
Well, like physical
or
fights you're throwing down?
huh?
Physical fights with this person or just in general with people?
Physical fights. Well, so this is the thing. A lot of girls liked him. Let me just actually turn this up a little bit. A lot of girls liked him.
Mm-hmm.
This is also what I did not realize when I came to the East Coast. I could have nothing to do with the situation, but because he is the person that they're affectionate for, now I become a problem.
Right.
So I had a lot of girls messing with me just because I was with him and they wanted to be with him.
Gotcha. Right.
Um, so that was quite a few of my fights there. And then I forgot there was something else that you had asked me.
Well, I was just asking about
Um,
the physical fights was the last question, but
yeah, but then we had some fights ourselves
mm-hmm.
from the cheating, but also because of the household that he had grew up in, which I didn't understand the background and dynamics. I assumed because his mom and dad were in the house that it was a household like my household.
Mm-hmm.
I was unaware that his father had some substance abuse issues just based off of he was in the military and he had been to a couple wars where he had been injured, and so that was his way of kind of like coping with the experience. But I didn't understand that that also put pressure on his family, and then his mom also was not from the States, she was from China. And so her English wasn't as
Mm-hmm.
good, and she was having to try to keep the family together. She's trying to adapt to American culture and everything like that, while her husband is in a substance, abuse relationship too. And I didn't understand his background fully, and so I thought I was going into something that was wholesome when it was actually extremely toxic. Because then he turned to the streets and to his friends and to all of those things for the same thing that I saw on TV, like, oh, being in the streets is cool and like having guns is cool and all this stuff. Like that was his mentality. Fighting all the time was cool. Like that was where he was
Yeah,
at.
so that's the ironic part, right? So the view that you had of Greensboro and your fear actually
Mm-hmm.
came true. And when I think about turning points, because life is all about a journey and different paths you take and what influences different paths. One could point to that coach who abused you and changed your mindset, and now you're making bad decisions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so so you started skipping school. So then what else happens to kind of challenge you?
Yeah. So started skipping school. My dad found several guns in my car at different points in time during the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what was it too? I got pregnant at 16.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I was a person who, again, from my upbringing, was like, I don't believe in divorce. You'll find there's some things that you'll do when you're in the situation. He really wanted me to have one. I wanted to please him, and I ended up having a divorce at 16. And I dropped out of high school.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a lot. So how'd you get back on track?
Um, Getting back on track, it took some time. It did take some time. But so when I dropped out, I was in the 10th grade. And so caveat too, I failed the 10th grade because of skipping so
Mm-hmm.
much. So when I dropped out, I would have dropped out in the 11th grade had I passed, but it was the 10th
Okay.
grade. Um, and what really put me on track is I ended up getting pregnant again with my son, who I have
Oh, so when
now.
you said you had I
Um,
think you said you had a divorce before. Did you mean an abortion? Okay.
Abortion. I'm sorry,
Clarify.
abortion. I
Mhm.
apologize. Yeah, I was not married in high school. but um but yeah, so I had the abortion when I was 16, and I remember, like, even during this whole time, like while I'm in all of this, it was not beyond my thought of where I had moments where I'm stepping back and I'm like, what are you
Mhm.
doing? Like, this is not who you are. I don't recognize this person. Um, but there was this weird thing of like, but I don't know how to be anything else but like a wife in this situation. I don't know how
Right.
to, be these other things. I don't know how to be a girlfriend. Like, I don't know how breaking up works and these things. But when I had the abortion, I I remember wanting to leave then. But I remember feeling so bad after the abortion. So what initially happened there, because of course at the time I was 16 years old, so my parents couldn't sign for me to have the abortion. Because him and his brother were very familiar with the judicial system, they told me that I could go file for a judicial waiver,
Mhm.
which means I have to go in front of a judge, let them know that I am mature enough to know that this is what I want, and I can make this decision of having an abortion. And that's exactly what I did. And it was hard even going in front of that judge, because the lawyer that I was working with had told me that the judge couldn't have kids herself.
Wow. Yeah.
And so I'm sitting in front of the judge asking her to give me permission to take life when I know that she can't give life
Yeah.
herself. So that was a rough day, and I still get emotional a little bit just like thinking about it. But yeah, that was a hard thing to do. Um, and so I had the abortion. His parents took me, and he was there. Afterwards, they went and grabbed the prescription that I was given, I guess, for, I think it was like antibiotics or something like that. And I remember going home and telling my parents what happened that day. And my parents were, yeah, my dad wanted to go and fight
Mm.
him that day. But yeah, and I just remember crying on my mom's lap
Yeah.
of just like, you know, why, and wanting to get up from the table, but not wanting to, being too scared to walk out and saying I'm still pregnant, of what his reaction was going to be, because it was, he had a very bad temper, as far as on him too. And yeah, just really not knowing. So I stayed in the relationship, until I got to the point. Well, I stayed in the relationship purposely to get pregnant with my son, because I felt like the only way that I could atone or make this better is I had to have a child then.
Mhm.
And so I had to replace the one that I let go of. And it had to be with the same person that I was with when it happened. And so I felt almost like imprisoned in the relationship while he was out still doing whatever. Um, it was like, that was kind of my cue. But to answer your question, and I'm sorry I got a little off on the
Sure.
side on it, but
Yep.
to answer your question, the turning point for me of like something has to change is, I was 4 months pregnant, and my son's father was in this. And they weren't real gangs, but they called themselves gangs. So it was like this clique over here
Mhm.
who had something with this clique over here, and like a couple weeks before, they were somewhere, and the guy started shooting at them, and there have been times where I've been there too, and they were shooting while I'm there too. And thank God none of the bullets actually hit me. Um, but we were both there, and we saw one of the guys who was part of that group, and it was on one of the main streets in Greensboro. It was very busy. It was broad daylight, maybe about 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And I remember we jumped out the car, and he went to approach the guy, and I pulled out a gun on the guy, and it's broad daylight where everyone can see me. I remember I had on some gray pants. I remember when I had on some like gray little yoga type pants, and this shirt that faded into different colors. And I remember this moment of, what are you doing? You're about to have a whole kid,
Mm-hmm.
and you can pull this trigger and your kid will never know who you are because you're going to be locked up. Who are you right now? You know? And at that point in time, for me, the fact that I did not care, I had gotten so
Right.
removed from me to where I didn't even care who even saw me at that point in time. I was like, this ain't me. And we got to, yeah, you got a choice to make right now.
Yeah. So,
And that was pretty much
so,
it.
so you came to the realization that what am I doing? This life ain't for me. Um, I'm 4 months pregnant, about to have another child. So
Yeah.
first step is the realization. But then the question, now what do you do? How do you change?
Yeah. I think for me, that letting go period, because I had knew that there was something else. And I guess this is the thing is, how I mentioned before, like I always had this inner pull in me of whenever I'm getting, or like when I feel like I'm getting outside of myself, to where it's like, what are you doing? This isn't even you, you know? Um, but I think because I was already fed up with the relationship before I had got pregnant with my son,
Mm-hmm.
it was easier to let that go. Um, and be like, I'm not going to be a part of this. I think, too, what also was a bit helpful for me getting out of it is my first trimester, I was so sick that I could barely leave the house. There was not really many times that I was even gone. I was only 90 something pounds when I got pregnant with my son, and I had lost 10 pounds just from, I hate that they call it morning sickness, but it was all day
Mm-hmm.
sickness. And so even that time gave me some time to think, and it gave me space to be clear. But also because my son's father was out there just doing whatever he wanted to do and barely coming around, and I'm hearing about other stuff, him being with other girls and stuff like that. It made it a little bit easier, and it gave me a little bit of time. So when I made that decision was on the way home from a doctor's appointment, he had come to, and we were on the way home and saw the gentleman. Um, when I came to that conclusion, like, nah, this is not anywhere what I would have saw for
Right.
myself.
So you had some time, given that you had all day sickness. You basically had to be at
Mm-hmm.
home. You had time to think, but you were skipping school. So did you end up?
I had dropped out at that point in
Okay,
time.
so you dropped out at that point in time. So now you're home. So now what's your thought in terms of what do I do now?
Well, I always knew when I put my mind to something
Mm-hmm.
that was pretty much it. So I was like, you know what? When was I supposed to graduate?
Uh-huh.
In 6 months, if I would have still been in high school, all right, I'm going back. I'm going to get my GED. I'm graduating with my
Okay.
class. And so from there, that pretty much started the trajectory of me turning things around. I went, got my GED. I graduated that June, the same time that
Wow.
if I
Okay.
would have stayed in high school would have happened. July, I had my son. 3 weeks after I had my son, hold on, yeah, no, 2 weeks after I had my son, I had a job. 3 weeks after I had my son, I started going to community college.
Okay.
And it just pretty much continued from
Now,
there.
Sub, you had the support of your parents on taking care of your son and your grandparent, one of your grandparents.
Yeah. Yeah. My grandma was still, she's still like healthy and fully functional.
Good.
She helps my cousin right now take care of his
Mhm.
take care of his son. But yeah, so my grandma would help watch my son whenever I was at work. My dad had to pass by there on his way home from work, so he would pick him up. Then I adjusted my schedule a little bit to where I was going to class at nighttime, and so I could be with my son during the daytime while my parents are at work. Then I would go at nighttime. They would handle him at nighttime. And so that's really how we made things work. And we made it work.
So you got a new trajectory. That sometimes that word's hard to say, but a new trajectory
It is.
in your life, which I think is amazing, that you came to the realization and through self-awareness, right? It doesn't sound like anybody was telling you to do something different. You just kind of came to that realization yourself. Is that right?
Yeah, and I think what also helped too is I found a church home there
Okay.
that I really
Mhm.
started like grounding myself in, because I'm not gonna lie, it's not like everything just turned off when I made that
Mhm.
decision. You still had like, if I would still hear certain things about, what my son's father was doing, it would hurt. Sometimes I would have the feeling of like wanting to go
Sure.
back, those type things. So it was important to me to surround myself around things and, people um, that I felt like could help to kind of give me a little bit of shield and support while I'm trying to build myself back up. Um, but then I think it was also too just kind of that still like knowing yourself, like, just knowing that like there is something different here for me.
Mhm.
And I don't know, I can't explain it, but I taste it and I've always sensed it. And so it was for me, it was always like there's something different. But I also think too, and the last thing I'll say with this is it gave me a time to realize what I love to do again.
Right.
Like I was so caught up into his identity. I had stopped playing sports. I stopped running track, stopped playing volleyball. Surprisingly, I don't even know how this happened, but even when I dropped, even when I dropped out of high school, they still let me be a majorette, and I was the captain of the majorette
How they
squad.
do that?
That means you're good at what you do.
Must be.
No, but and then I remember even being recruited by some HBCUs, during that time.
Mhm.
This was right before I had found out that I was pregnant with my son, but I got back to dancing again because I was a trained dancer during high school. I had a full ballet scholarship.
Wow.
And I ended up messing up the scholarship at the end of everything, being in that relationship.
Yeah.
And I always used to sing at different functions and in different like city events and stuff like
Mhm.
that. And so I just found myself naturally gravitating back to that creative space and really just like running with it and going back into choreography. And next thing you know, I'm in the studio and I'm doing songwriting, and then I transition into an artist, and then I'm touring and these different things. And but I was just having fun and doing what I love to do and learning about me again.
Yeah, you found
But I
you
think that that's the grace in
yeah,
it.
you found your I call it your phase 3, which is rediscovering the arts, right? And like you
Yeah.
said, that was your passion. So the dancing, choreography, and then the gospel singing, right? So it sounded like
Hmm.
you really got uh, a lot of activity in the gospel space, which sounded like in the beginning it was something very positive for you. But then
Hmm.
life again throws its curveballs. So, talk to me
Oh
about
yeah.
the gospel industry and then some specific things that happened to you with respect to management.
Yeah. So being in that space. So when I started out in that space, it was me and one little aspiring
Mm.
producer. And but we were making some really good music that started to get noticed. I was starting to get booked for different events and different shows. Then I was always a person like very proactive. Like how do I make another opportunity out of an opportunity, or how do I make two opportunities out of one opportunity at the same time?
Mm-hmm.
And so they used to have this thing called a Holy Hip Hop Awards that happened at the Fox Theater
Okay.
every year in Atlanta, Georgia, and it would be packed out. And so I was set to perform there about 2 years in a row. And I remember when I realized I got on the roster, I started looking at who do they have to host, and I reached out and was like, "Hey, do you guys need like some more hosts or anything like that?" So they were like, "Yeah." So hosted with another co-host. I don't know if he goes by the same name, but his name is Jesus Juice. So shout out Jesus Juice. Uh, we used to host the award show, but um, I remember like from that, it just continued to like grow. Then I started like was in Nashville and was doing like the pre-show for the Dove Awards and the Stellar Awards and these different things. I think where some of my conflict came in, because I'll say during the time I was again just naturally like, if the doors are opening, I'm going to kind of continue to move down this road. But I think where I kind of hit ahead a little bit with it is, one, I was not strictly gospel. You can hear by the way that I talk, and my sound is not gospel. My sound was like this blend of like urban pop, eclectic,
Hmm.
like different sounds and stuff. But that came from, I grew up in Rapid City, South
Of
Dakota.
course.
So I had like the country and
Right.
the pop and but I was again in a black church. So I had like the little gospel vibe. And then I had like the R&B because I was still from a black family. So we listened to BET at nights and, stayed up to watch a Janet Jackson video drop at midnight.
Yep.
And so, I started getting criticism from the way I looked. I had a guy call me from New York who was a major promoter who set up opening acts for all of like the gospel legends and stuff like that. And he called me and he was like, I never make this phone call, but I just got your EPK kit, and I'm seeing you and I'm listening to your music and I will never book you for a show. And he was like, you're too sexy. And I feel like your sound is not a gospel sound. And yeah, and he was determined to just tear me down from there. But I was okay with it to a certain extent because I think I was okay to a certain extent because of a belief that I have within myself. Um, but I also knew that there would be some doors that were closed in some areas because I did not, like, I had people sometimes like, I want you to sing this Yolanda Adams song. I don't have Yolanda Adams' voice. Now I got her range,
Right.
but I don't have, my voice is a very clear voice. I'll say from what producers have told me, which is like sometimes some of the work that I get right now is because they're like, because your voice is nice and crisp. It doesn't have some of these residues and
Right.
grittiness and stuff in it, but I can make it gritty if I need to, but that's not the natural
Hmm.
way that I'm going to sing the whole time. And so those, some of those doors were closing. But I will say some of them were closing, but a lot more were opening rather than
Okay.
closing.
So you didn't
But
you
I
didn't
think
let
what
that negative feedback get you down.
No, I mean, because it opened up the ability for me to have my own radio show.
Okay.
So what happens usually at award shows and stuff, and usually if you're watching TV, you see it on red carpets where you're talking to like the media the whole time. Well, sometimes in behind the scenes, they have like a lot of media rooms where you can go and you're like talking to different radio
Yep.
people. And I was doing a radio interview and there was a guy who owned a station, and he was like, yo, you really have a great personality. Have you ever thought about doing radio? You have a great voice. Excuse me. You have a great
Hmm.
voice. And I was like, sure. So I ended up putting a radio show together. I wanted it to have more of even though it was an evening show, I wanted it to have more of like a morning feel with like co-hosts and stuff. So I pulled some of my friends in who have very different personalities I thought were funny. It was me and a girl, and then two guys, and we had a great dynamic. And we produced a great radio show that went to be the second highest radio show within the second month that it was released in the area. It was in Greenville, South Carolina, and then it streamed internationally. So we had a lot of listeners from Africa
Nice.
that actually
Hmm.
enjoyed the show. Excuse me. But then also that's where I got signed to my independent label
Hmm.
that was stationed in Atlanta. Was during that same thing. They were actually, talking to different artists and stuff like that because they had a show too. And he was like, "Yo, I saw your set. It was really good. Again, being a background of a dancer, I was dancing on set, and I'm not talking about like, just little things that you see when people do arm
Right. Right.
movements
Right.
because they really can't dance, but it was like a full
Hmm.
choreography that you would see. And sometimes that was frowned upon because it was like, oh, well, this is a performance. Well, you think every time a gospel singer gets up there, they feel like being in worship, or feel like sometimes you gotta like get yourself into it some way or another. But
yep.
Yeah, but I always had this, and this is the thing that I think drove me a bit was, if God is the God of creativity, why do we want everything to look the same and be the same? Yeah, and it has to fit in this box. I am so not a box person. Like, and I'll say this, and I know some people, may take issue with it depending on what your background beliefs are. But one thing I can say that I admire about Beyonce that is very similar to the type of artist that I am is we will go into different spaces and genres and don't care. Like, I understand her because I'm wired that way. But I don't think everyone gets that. Like, they feel like if you go into a different space or genre, it's because you're trying.
Right.
What if you're not trying? What if that's something that's actually
natural,
in
that you enjoy? And
yeah,
the way I look at it, and there's not a lot of people who fit into this box, but it is a box. You're a minority's minority, right? Based on your background. And so you're never going to fit in anybody's box per se, because you've got a bunch of little boxes in you, right? So when you look at your box is a big box, right? So it's a little bit ridiculous to try and put people in different genres, but Americans, our society likes to characterize people, and we don't feel comfortable unless you're.
We need categories.
We need categories.
I think even on my Twitter right now it says putting me in a box is a disservice to you.
That's right.
Because you can get so much more out of me.
Yeah, you're missing out
by just letting me be who I am.
All right, so it sounds like things are going pretty good with the career side, right? So this part of the road in our overall journey seems to be going good, but what's the turning point here? Well, my question is, why are you at Cisco? If this
So for me, as things started picking up and things really start moving forward, I start to get a good glimpse behind the scene. And I was disappointed. I'll say disappointed. I'll also say pissed. I felt like I was tricked because, to be honest, I was in a church where it was like, oh, doing secular stuff is bad. It's of the devil. Everything that's not of God is it's a devil. But again, remember, just like I was talking about my coach, but there's one thing he didn't quite teach me in this whole teaching me a lesson thing, so moving into this phase of my life, hey, there's one important thing that you might have left out is that these are all the same industries. They're all the same industry heads running both of these industries. And just because you are raising your hand and you're saying I'm singing this does not mean that you are not doing the same stuff that we perceive people in the secular industry to be doing. And so to have a upfront seat of seeing that, being, approached by different artists that you're like, okay, you clearly got somebody. Even the, seeing the NDAs or, seeing and also hearing about NDAs that have to be signed. Again, so what I loved about myself is, remember I said I never do clicks?
You did.
So when I would go to New York on a regular basis, so usually about every month for about a week, I was going back and forth to New York during this time, and I was dancing up there and everything and networking. And I met a gentleman who took me under his wings for real, though, as a mentor. He was a former exec of Sony Columbia. And so even he would have me in spaces and in meetings and hearing the conversations. But I remember distinctly one time we were driving, I think it was on the east side down by the Hudson, and they're talking about a gospel artist. And they're like, oh, yeah, such. And I'm hearing the conversation. Who he's on the phone with doesn't know that there's someone else in the car.
Right.
And they're talking about all the producers she done went through And when I say went through, I mean from a sexual
I know what you
standpoint.
mean. Yeah,
And
just
she's
make
about to have
money.
this album drop. Yeah, and so, but I think, so to kind of answer your question around that, things started going sideways for me when I looked at the opportunities that I had given up to go secular and to do things from a secular aspect. I had the opportunity to be walked into being Beyonce's background singer, and I thought I was going to go to hell if I did it, and so I turned it
Wow.
down. I had the opportunities to sign with major labels, and I turned it down. Now, one thing that I was not aware of at that time, so I won't say that this is the opportunity I turned down because of that reason. I just didn't know, was to really turn my songwriting perspective to a broader standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember before my mentor passed away, I remember him sitting down with me and he was like, "You are an excellent writer. And I'm trying to figure out why you're not writing for more people."
Mm-hmm.
But I just didn't know about that at the time. And I didn't understand what that looked like. But had I known that during the times I was going up to New York so much, I probably would have been networking in those spaces and I probably would have been writing for major artists.
Yeah.
And so that's to me where the conflict started to come in, is pulling back and seeing that both of these worlds are pretty much the same. We just have this idea that one of them is better than the other. But what was funny is there's a lot of people, even during this time, that I had met that are in the industry all together, and they're doing amazing things in the industry. They're saved. They're not only in the church and only doing stuff from a gospel perspective and stuff like that. I was treated so much better from, to be honest, from when I was in the secular spaces than when I was in the gospel spaces. And I think that that's where it hit me, and it took a blow out of me. And um, and I needed to take a step back. But what also helped take that step back is the manager that I had. He had come from the secular space into the gospel space, and um, he really was like, "Yo, we're about to, take you in a whole different vein. I see who you are as an artist." He passed away
Wow.
suddenly. I was in New York. On a Monday, I got a phone call that he was in the hospital. On that Thursday, I got a phone call that he had passed away. And so I was like, I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to keep going, Tita. And so I was working with my marketing manager at that time. Well, let me just give a shout out and rest in peace to Jonathan Bixby. And then I was working with my marketing manager by the name of DJ Lace. And 6 months later, after my manager had passed away, me and DJ Lace were working on a marketing plan to release my next project. And he passed away about
Oh,
5 minutes after we got off the phone with
wow.
each other.
Wow.
And after the experience with the industry and then that happening to me, like, I think I just went into a shell.
It took the train
Yeah.
off the tracks, basically, right?
Yeah, I think I was in a full state of depression. Well, I'm not gonna say I think. I know I was in a full state of
Mm-hmm.
depression.
Yeah,
And
that's
that's when
certainly a
I was
lot.
like, I need to make
Yeah,
a
yeah,
change.
that's certainly a lot to deal with. It sounded like things were going great, and other than the
Yeah.
disillusionment, and I think your story also tells us the importance of having a mentor, regardless of what type of industry you're in. I was
Mm-hmm.
listening to an interview. I forget the actor's last name. I think his first name is Ernie. He's the black guy in Ghostbusters. So
Mm-hmm.
he was being interviewed, and I think he only made $40,000 on the first Ghostbusters he starred in because he didn't know. He didn't have a mentor who understood the business. He didn't have an agent that was willing to stand up for him and fight. That agent was just glad to get a client in a movie at that point.
Yeah.
And so, his struggle was, he was famous and poor, basically, right? But if he
Mm-hmm.
had a mentor to explain things to him, like you had your mentor who was kind of guiding you and say, "Hey, you can write," or someone who told you, "Girl, what you doing? Go secular because you're gonna find out this business. If the reason you don't want to go secular is for these reasons, and if you knew that up
Mm-hmm.
front, you would have done those deals."
Yeah. I think sometimes of I wonder where I would have been and who I think I know who I would be a little bit more now, but I wonder where I would have been because I think my initial thing with going into being an artist, I always knew that I wanted to be one of those artists that brought a whole nother generation of artists up. Like what I thought was interesting in the gospel industry, you don't really see them mentoring people underneath them to come up. And that's another thing that really got me. Like in the secular side of the industry, you see artists bringing up other artists and putting other artists on. I would be hearing the phone calls where some of these major artists, again, I'm not going to name any names, we're talking to radio people and management talking about, I don't care about you playing these new artists. You need to be playing my
Mm-hmm.
stuff, you know, and it was all self-serving. Um, and that was never, again, like my posture is always um, helping other people. So no doubt for me that I would have definitely been like, all right, let me look at this playing field. Let me see who's down here right now, who is a really has really great talent, unique, you know, and got the determination, the hard work. Let me cultivate them and do some artist development on them and bring up a whole slew. So I would have probably been like the Little Wayne of the gospel industry. Have that happen where it's like you brought all these people on
Right.
because there's enough for everybody to
Mm-hmm.
eat. I've always believed that. I say that all the time. So there's no need to hoard it. But that was a disappointment.
Gotcha. So I think when we talked, you said this happened when you're around 27 is when your management passed away. You went
Mm-hmm.
into, as you state, a depression. Um, so
Yes, I was doing good for some years.
so how did you get out of that? Did you go back to school again? What was the plan?
Yeah, so I decided, and so during this time while I was an artist, and I don't even know how I was able to do this because I was still working. But I always had something where I can kind of like do my own schedule just to make a little bit of extra money.
Right.
And then I was traveling doing the music. I think that so for anyone out there, if you are listening and you are ever thinking about becoming an artist, you can actually make a living being an artist, but it may start off a little slower and it may be harder. So I had some money coming in, but it wasn't enough to sustain for a while. Um, and then yeah, so when this happened, um, I'm trying to think. Yeah, so I decided to go back to school. So I took a step back, decided to go back to school. I had stopped working at the time. Um, so I didn't stop working by choice. I had actually gotten fired from the place that I was
Mm-hmm.
at. I ended up having to file a discrimination lawsuit against the company that I was with. I ended up winning that. They had to pay me. Um, Interesting enough that was probably one of the maybe handful of times that I actually experienced
Hmm.
racism being in the South on the East Coast. Um, but yeah, because it was motivated by, again, their perceptions of me
Mm-hmm.
thinking that they were seeing whoever they saw on TV. Um, and yeah, so I decided to go back to school. And I was thinking about what are my next steps. I was kind of feeling like, how do I regroup from this?
Yeah.
And so I had this moment where I was just in a state of depression. And I just remember calling my dad, and I was just like, and this is the first time I've been this scared of being like in a state of depression because I called my dad and I was like, hey, I don't know if I'm gonna make it till tomorrow morning.
Wow.
And I don't want my son to wake up and his last memory of me be him finding my
Mm-hmm.
body. And I just asked my dad if he would just come stay the night at the house just to make sure. Because again, this was one of those moments I didn't recognize myself. I didn't recognize how I was thinking and coping with everything that was happening around me. Um, but I felt like I was in a box. And I already stated before, like I hate being in boxes. It is hard for you to put a creative in a box. And not only did I feel like I was in a box, but even in my belief in God and my relationship with him, I felt like I was in a prison because of sometimes, I'm not going to say all, but how some churches um, talk about God and there being like so many restrictions and you can't, and this is bad, and this is such. Well, what do you do with someone who is a creative if everything that they love to do is perceived as being bad?
Right.
I didn't give myself the gift,
Mhm.
you know? Um, and I knew that I had to get out or I would continue to spiral. I'm not saying anything bad particularly about that church. It did not work for who I was and who I was
Right.
becoming. And so I just remember saying, I have to get out of my environment. And that was the biggest thing for me. Like I realized that for me to move to any other level, I had to get around different people who thought a little bit differently, who weren't as confined, who maybe just didn't stay. Because this is the thing, we think that because people are on the East Coast or wherever they're at, if they're not in this rural town, if they're in metropolitan or urban areas, that they're diversified. You're still not. A lot of people actually still are not.
Yeah, they're micro
Like,
communities, right? That you get caught up and you
exactly.
feel suffocated, right?
Exactly. And so I realized that a lot of people who were even in my communities were in their own micro
Mhm.
communities and trying to suck me into that. And that was really hard. And so I just remember going into work one day, I circled a date on my calendar. I was like, I don't know what it is, but I feel like there's something in an alignment inside of me that's like, I'm gonna be out of here. Cause I was trying for years to move to New York. And my mentor at that time was like, I got a job for you. He did if anyone remembers the Village Underground, that was, a Sunday nights famous for a lot of, famous people coming in and, rocking the mic and stuff like that. Amazing open mics. He was like, yeah, come sing with my band, Sunday nights for the open mics. But I still needed to make some additional
Yeah.
income and couldn't figure out how to make that work at the same time. And so I ended up started looking at Atlanta. And within 3 weeks of me circling that on my calendar and saying I have to get out of here, or I don't know if I'm going to still exist in the way that I do, I got a transfer. A job opened up. I transferred down to Atlanta and I moved.
Okay.
And then that was hell. Like, it was like great in hell, great in hell. But
You're trying to find a home.
yeah,
Yeah. You're trying to
yeah.
find a home. So what was hell about Atlanta? Atlanta's the Mecca, right? That's
Um,
what everybody says, right?
oh
Mecca.
yeah. So no, so I'll say this. So when I went to Atlanta from the performing arts space, it was
Yeah.
amazing.
A lot of talent down
Even though, yeah, even though Atlanta is still cliquish
there.
in those scenes, when you're meeting artists and actors and actresses and stuff that are just trying to find their way to, you end up becoming family. So,
Right.
I had created some really tight knit relationships in those spaces. I still talk to a lot of them today and see them on TV shows and in videos and stuff and call them like, oh my God, that's so amazing. Remember when,
Mm-hmm.
and stuff. And so, I feel like, so just in saying that, quick lesson for the people. Um, Stop always looking for the people who are above you. The same people that are working on your same level are the ones that will continue to move up. And
Right.
if you treat them right, you will always be able to call and they'll pick up the phone for you. And so yeah, so we have great relationships to this day. Um, but it was the work environment. Again, I found myself in an environment where what was interesting to me is there was a clique of girls that were extremely petty, but then the manager of the unit was extremely petty. I have never seen, the cliques,
It's
like,
like they're still in high
that's one
school,
thing I
right?
just never, yeah, that's one thing I never understood. I never understood it, is the nastiness and stuff like that. But then I always have to remind myself they may have grown up in this from when they were like, in elementary school and stuff like that. I didn't grow up in that. And so what's normal to them is not normal to me. And so I just remember statements being made to me of, oh, you think that you're better because I wouldn't engage in like a conversation where maybe they were gossiping or they
Right.
were talking about what's happening in entertainment news and stuff. And I just was like, I just don't, but I just remember it getting really bad one day at work where I was in the car and I just cried because this is another thing about myself, is there was a situation that was happening where some of my coworkers got mad at me because I wanted to invite one of my other coworkers to something we were all doing. They didn't want her to come, so they were like all mad at me. But then they go to her and tell her, oh, she's trying to, create this event and stuff like that. And we don't think that she should do it. So then the other girl starts talking to me, not knowing that the whole thing was because they didn't want you in it.
Right.
And so
Nobody
I'm
got
not
time
one
for that
that's gonna
mess.
like, yeah. So this is the thing. I wasn't one of those
Right.
people to when I figured out what's going on, I wasn't gonna be like, well, the reason such and such, such and such. I was just like, all right. And I left it like that. But it didn't mean that it didn't hurt, because when I went to Atlanta, I didn't have like family around. I didn't know anybody besides my sister's ex-boyfriend that I stayed with for like a month and I barely knew him. But that was the closest thing that, as far as me to move around. And so I was looking for that sense of family. And so that hurt. And I just remember being in the car and I was crying and I called my god sister up and she was just like, why are you crying? What's wrong with you? And she was like, you are not there to make friends. You are she said an atmosphere shifter or something and stuff. And so I think that's where like some of the hell came from was, and then it got bad to where like the managers were getting in on it, and that's when I just remember like I had to take some time off for surgery. I had started like kind of listening to the book The Secret, like vaguely. And I didn't it took me a long time to listen to it because I heard in church that I was going to go to hell if I listened to it because it was talking and teaching something different. So finally I was like, let me just listen to this. So I listened to it. One day I took $100,000 bill and cut it out and put it on a thing and I put it on my desk. And I was like, this is my starting point. This is just a start of where I want to. This is not, the big of where I want to get to, but this is just my starting point.
You have that vision. The Secret teaches that manifest, through vision, you manifest things happening. Yeah.
Well, what I didn't realize is I had manifested coming to Atlanta, because when I marked that date on my calendar that I'm gonna be gone by this time, and I felt that alignment, it happens.
So did you manifest your way out of Atlanta? So how'd you end up in Raleigh?
I knew that it was time. One thing I'll always say is I've always had a strong intuition. And so there was this point in time around that last year that I was in Atlanta where I was like, I think something's getting ready to shift for me. And I remember telling, so this is kind of another piece of living how my parents live, of taking people in. I had this girl and her daughter staying with me that didn't have a place to go. And I didn't know her, barely knew her, but I remember having a conversation with her and I was like, I feel like something's telling me that my time is going to be up in Atlanta pretty soon.
Okay.
And probably about 3 months or so, I got a job offer, but they were like, but we want you to be in Raleigh. And I was like, okay. So I had peace with it because I knew there's just something sometimes that you just know without a shadow of a doubt of what that is. And I've always had those moments in life.
Now, during this whole time, are you still, sounds like you have some corporate jobs. You had some with some catty people, along the way, but are you still doing some of the creative stuff on the side?
Yeah, absolutely. When I went to Atlanta, I went to like a couple different events and stuff like that. And then I started meeting some people, started doing some studio sessions with some different people, met with some people in the ASCAP office. So I was trying to figure out how to start writing and things of that nature. I ended up doing an audition for, this was so random. I remember I was driving back from North Carolina to visit my family and going back to Atlanta. And I ended up seeing like this audition, and I was debating like, should I go to this audition? Shouldn't I? I ended up going to the audition. It was for a baby mama part.
Okay.
Her name was Tasha. I auditioned for it. I ended up getting the role. Um, and then we started shooting for the movie, and it was called A Second Chance. That was the name of it.
Okay.
So we started shooting for it and everything like that. It ended up getting pulled because both the producer and director were having creative differences, and it ended up being just a mess. They couldn't decide on stuff, so the movie ended up getting scrapped. Um, but I was like, oh, okay, well, got my foot
That's
in
it.
that door
Yeah,
a
a
little
little
bit,
experience.
and
Yeah.
again, yeah, made some friends and stuff. So started going to some acting classes with them. I got involved with the meetup group. There was one called Music ATL, that someone was getting ready to let go of, and they had reached out to me to see if I would take that over. So I started doing like little meetups for like songwriting and stuff like that, and it gave me a chance to network. Wow, like as a businesswoman, it allowed me more tentacles than just being like, hey, I'm an artist and I'm a
Right.
songwriter. So it allowed me to create a lot of different what do you call it, different relationships that maybe some people, if you're just again in one vein, not able to create. During that time, I think I was still, well, no, I'm not going to say I think, I'm going to say I know that I was still struggling with what does it look like for me re-emerging as an artist.
Right.
And so part of that, and then also I'll say there was a piece of me that was still dealing with feeling like I failed to some extent because of some of the decisions, and then feeling a sense of abandonment because of people in my life passing away who were very strong in that space for me. That honestly, I was just in the studio, heads down, writing and recording, and like just, and I'm thinking even back to then, like it just the feeling of it, that tight chest of being too scared to let anything I was writing out
Mm,
and to just
interesting.
let it go.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe almost a
Yeah.
fear. I'm no psychologist, so forgive me. But maybe a fear if you were really to let it go and then it wasn't successful, that would hurt even more. Is that possible?
I think so. I think so because there had already been a little bit of an expectation set,
Yeah.
but I was always evolving at the same
Mhm.
time. The great thing is even with all of that, and even with me being in corporate right now and stuff like that, like I got music coming out this year. I'm happy
Okay.
about it,
Yeah.
and it's talking a lot about this vulnerable time of my life of not feeling like I was enough, or not feeling like I belonged, not feeling like I fit in. I kind of always felt like I was the black sheep, even if I could be a chameleon in different
Hmm.
spaces. I still never felt like I had a home.
Yeah. It's the minority syndrome is what I call it. I think it's a
Yeah,
little bit of that.
I love that
Yeah.
term.
Yeah. We can have a whole nother conversation. Sometimes I feel that way for a whole bunch of reasons, but there are a number of folks within the African American community because of different circumstances where like you don't fit that box, right? That everybody
Mhm.
doesn't have the same set of experiences, and so that I think when people realize that and approach people with that knowledge and not try to put people in boxes, I think we could all get along a whole lot better. So I want to
Yeah.
get to the point now where, because it sounds like you've had a lot of turning
What is
points,
this?
right? It's been a roller coaster, right? It's been a roller coaster. But when I spoke to you, there was a point in which you were able to reset. So I had asked you the question, okay, Letita,
Yeah.
you've had all this stuff happen to you. You've suffered through depression. Have you sought any counseling, or what was your antidote for all the ways that the negativity that you were feeling? And you gave me a very interesting answer that I want to explore.
Yeah. Yeah. So that point for me once I got back to North Carolina, I will say that there was this little leveling kind of like reset, but then any trauma is not meant to be stuck in the body, and anything that you don't figure out how to get out of your body becomes trauma that gets stuck. And what I didn't know is that like me dancing and like
Mm-hmm.
the way, creatively moving and stuff like that helps to release all of that stuff. And that's why they say like it gives endorphins when you
Right.
run and when you work out and all
Right.
this other stuff. It's actually true. And so I was at a point where my body started breaking down. Things started showing up in my body. It was like deteriorating, and and I would have like pains that just would not go away and stuff. And I had a moment to, again, how I think about things is I'm a very out the box person, and I think of God like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I always challenge myself when I hear something that I learned growing up or in church where, it puts some type of limitation on God. I'm like, but God is not a God of limitations. And so I just had this moment where I just started being like, okay, God, I have went to therapy. I've done EMDR.
What's that? What's
Um,
EMDR?
it's I eye movement, rapid something desensitization. I can't remember. I think I got the R
All
wrong.
right, I'll look at it.
But basically, yeah, as I said, but basically it is where now it actually works. So I will say that. Um, you got it up?
Eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing.
Yes. And so what it does is it helps to reset your neural pathways so that you remember the event, but you don't have the emotion tied to it, because while you're talking about it, your eyes are following, the thing that my therapist was using. It was like this light. And so it helps you to talk about it without feeling it because you're so focused on this thing where it kind of
Gotcha.
desensitizes that experience so that you can move past it and release it.
Yeah, it says it says
So
it
there,
says this method involves moving your eyes a specific way while you process traumatic memories. So yeah,
yeah, yeah.
never heard of that.
And
Yeah,
so, yeah, I mean, like I said, it does work. It just wasn't working fast enough for how much I had let build and pile onto
yeah.
me. Um, and so I just, I just remember crying on the floor one Saturday morning, like a baby. And I was just like, there has to be something else. And I remember just saying, you know what, God, um, if they say food can heal the body, I don't believe you just stopped at the body. Why would you stop there? I believe that there's something that can help heal the mind that you have created that is out here somewhere. Um, and so I started doing some
Mm-hmm.
research, and that's when I ran into plant
Mm-hmm.
medicine. And so I did like a lot of research on, you know, why it does what it does, how it does what it does, what is the background history behind it, all these different type things. Because I mean, even though I took the limitations off of God, I still wanted to make sure that I wasn't into some type of cultish
Sure. Right.
thing at the same time. And so I went down to Mexico 2 separate times for
Mm-hmm.
7 days. Ended up doing ayahuasca. Um, did ayahuasca twice during those 7 days, samadhi once, and then bufo, which is like smoke the toad.
Yeah.
Um, did that
So
twice.
you had a shaman
And
and all that good stuff to go with.
yeah, so there was a shaman there. And during that experience, what I appreciated about it is we were able to ask questions. And so I just straight up asked, I was like, is this a cult?
Yeah.
Like, I just asked, straight up while we're in the little circle getting ready to get started. And he was like, no. He was like, I'm a shaman because I'm just the one administering this. He talked about where it actually came from. He talked about why they treat it with the respect that they were treated with. He talked about what he was going to go through as far as just blessing it and just and cleansing of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then one thing that he said that was really, I think that was like a light bulb moment for me. He said, this, you do not have to be tied to any religious beliefs to do this.
Right.
He said, we have people who come who are from all different religious backgrounds, from Muslim to Christian to agnostic to, everything in between the spectrum. And what he said around it was, think about it like medicine. If I give you a Tylenol, it's going to do what it's designed to do, regardless of what you believe.
That's right. Yeah.
And so this is the same thing with that. This is a way that helps to help to process trauma out the body by actually resetting your neural pathways, taking you deeper into your self-conscious so that it can start to process things out of the body. And he explained, he said, you might see geometric shapes. This is what's happening when you see that. This is, normal. You might see some things from your past. He was like, you might see some things from one of your ancestors' past, because what it also does is it gets into the trauma of what's in your DNA. And he was like, I can't promise what type of journey that you're going to have. Now, it will do what it will do. It's not going to give you what you want. It's going to give you what you need.
Mm-hmm.
And in that experience, I'll say those experiences completely changed my life.
Now, you went multiple times, right?
I did.
So we'll get to how it changed your life, but is it cumulative? So when you did it the initial time, you felt you needed to go back for more? So I'm just curious about that journey of it.
Yeah. So the first time that I went, so we talked earlier in the conversation about the relationship that I was in and how the relationship with my coach changed the trajectory of how I dealt with men moving forward. When the relationship with me and my son's father was over with, I also was stuck in the cycle of feeling like if I had talked to a guy or dated a guy, like I had to do what he wanted me to do sexually, even if I didn't want to. And so I found myself in that cycle. But then I also found myself really falling deeply in love with somebody and being hurt all over again from that experience. And just so the buildup of the feeling like I'm like knowing that I'm good enough, but feeling like this is what I have to do, like that trap and that cycle, on top of the pain, on top of other traumas, on top of feeling like a failure because I'm a high school dropout, on top of being a single mom, on top of all of these things were just stuck in my system. And so when I went the first night that we did, the ayahuasca, I didn't feel anything. Like if anyone read or listened to the Will Smith book where he talked about his experience doing it, and he was like, all he heard was like, like talking in his head. Like I literally was like, man, I wonder what I'm going to eat tomorrow. Man, everyone else looks like they're having such an experience. Yeah. And I'm like, man, I'm not feeling anything. And so when I was getting up, because they make you stay in there a certain time because they usually know how long it's going to be in your system. It still lingers in your system a little bit. Yeah, but they want to make sure you're safe. And so when I was getting up and leaving, the shaman was like, he happened to be like walking back in the room. He was like, so how was your experience? And I was like, I'm a little disappointed. I didn't feel anything, but maybe later. He was like, no, it gave you exactly what you needed. And I was thinking to myself, like, so nothing?
Those gummies didn't do anything for me.
And I wish it was a gummy. It would have probably
tasted good. That's what people say when they take the gummies, but then after a while, it becomes cumulative.
Yeah.
What the hell?
Yeah. But so then the next day, we did this thing called samadhi. And it was just this little pill. And so what he said, how he introduced it, he was like, so ayahuasca is the feminine and samadhi is the masculine. So he said ayahuasca takes you through a journey. So when you're under ayahuasca, it's gentle. It takes you up, it takes you down, then it starts to take you deeper. He says samadhi takes you straight to the mountaintop.
Now I'm scared.
And you're there.
Now I'm scared.
Yeah. So I'm thinking to myself like, oh, well, the ayahuasca didn't do anything. So hopefully the samadhi does something. I took that thing. I was the only one in there from 2:00 in the afternoon till 9:00 at night. I was on my face bawling. I kept like shaking my arm, especially like my left arm. I felt this energy coming through my body, and it kept coming through the left side. And I remember when I was laying there and I was like crying, and I was in a, what was interesting is the whole time I was in a birthing position. So I was like, not like on my back, but like, face down, kind of rocking like I was in labor or something
Right.
like that. And I just remember having that experience, and just everything just felt like it was coming. It was pulling through my left, and I kept like pulling my fingers up,
Mm-hmm.
and I was asking a lady to pull on my arm a little bit. Cause the thing is like you're under, but you're still slightly conscious. I'm not going to even say slight, like you're still, if you needed to go to the bathroom, you could.
Right.
But you can also allow yourself to go in deeper, and you go in deeper by relaxing into it and letting go of the
Mm-hmm.
control. And so I just remember laying there for a second, and I remember saying, God, why is this happening on my left side? And I heard God say, because I'm dealing with everything in your heart.
Wow.
And if anyone knows anything about the body, is that your ring finger on your left finger is the only vein that goes from your heart into your finger. And so it made sense why it was coming through here. And I felt like I kept needing to
Mm.
pull out. And every time I pull out, it was a release. What was crazy about that moment, though, is that um, ever since maybe 2013, I always had to get massages every single month, and sometimes twice a month, because of how much stress and how much pain my back would always be
Yeah.
here. After that experience, all the pain left my body, and I never had to get a massage. I haven't had to get a massage
Wow.
since. And so, but I just remember even in that experience, I kept feeling the pulling out of my arm, but I also kept feeling like something was pulling down in my uterus. And it was showing me that it was also, now nothing was coming out. So let me just say that, where someone's like, what? But it was showing me that it was starting to cleanse everything that had been done, and all
Mm-hmm.
of the trauma
Mm-hmm.
and all of the pain and all of the misuse. But at the same time, which was crazy for me, is not only was it doing it from a cleansing, but I kept hearing, you're meant to birth. You're meant to give life. You're meant to birth. You're meant to give life. And it wasn't even from a physical standpoint. It was more from a purpose
Right.
standpoint.
Right.
And then as we went into, so that was the second day, as we went into the third day. Oh, so one thing that did happen that I feel like really helped, though, is before the initial first ayahuasca ceremony, they do a cambo ceremony, which is basically they take poison from a frog skin. Let me see if I have a part on me. They did
That what
one
they call
part
the
here on my,
toad stuff?
I don't know if you can see
Yeah.
it, but it's just a dot right
Yeah.
here. You usually don't do it on your arm. I have 3 marks going down my leg, but it's that's not the toad, it's a frog for this
Okay.
one. And they take the poison of the skin, and they burn marks on your skin,
Mm-hmm.
and then they peel the skin off that's on there, and they put the poison
Wow.
in your skin. And what it does is it immediately starts to flush your lymphatic system,
Mm-hmm.
and starts to get all the toxins out of your body. And I remember, I remember when I did it, I was like, okay, I feel okay. And it only takes about 20 minutes for this whole process to happen. I remember I did it, and then they were like, keep drinking water, keep drinking water. And I was like, I think I'm gonna throw up. They was like, that's good, keep drinking
That's
water,
when
because it's
you
supposed to purge.
evacuate toxins.
Yeah. So, yeah. And so when I threw up, I was like, wait a minute. I kind of looked in the bucket, because all I had drunk was like a lot of water and stuff. And I was like, what is this?
Mm-hmm.
And it was a bucket full of parasites. They looked like
No
noodles.
way.
100%. 100%. And they were like, no, that's normal. It
No
takes
way.
things that have been in your system, in your lymphatic system, and it comes out in different ways. There were some people who had to run to the bathroom. It was coming out the back and the front,
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that. But yeah, so I think that was a good initial part, because they say that doing that before taking the medicine helps to allow the medicine to get in a little
Yeah.
deeper.
Yeah.
And they do put you on like a diet where it's like no meat, just plant-based
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that, because the more natural foods that you have, it allows the medicine to do the work that it needs to
Mhm.
do. And so, but when I say that was life changing, and by the time we had it was crazy. The last ceremony that we had that night, um, I didn't even think this. I didn't even think that this was a possibility. I thought that only crazy people did this, but apparently I must be one of them. But I remember having this moment where um, I was in this. I felt like I was in like this bigger shell of a cocoon, and I was looking at myself wrapped in like another cocoon, and but me looking at me.
Mm.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's like I'm in a shell with me, and I see a reflection of me, and the reflection of me is in a cocoon.
Okay.
But we're both in this larger
Got it.
cocoon. And I just remember laying there, and it was showing me this death of me, um, and this new person getting ready to be reborn.
Be reborn. Yeah.
And I kept hearing again, I kept hearing you were meant to create, you were meant to give life, and you were meant to heal. You were meant to create, you were meant to give life, you were meant to heal. And that just kept going, like you were meant to create, you were meant to give life, you were meant to heal. Um, and I remember coming out of that a little bit, and I just, and if anyone knows the song called Spirit Bird by Xavier, I cannot think of his last name, but they had this song playing. I had never heard of it before. All of a sudden, something in me as this song, and the song is talking about how our spirits continue to go on after we pass, and we continue
Yeah.
to try to do this motion forward. But
Yeah. Xavier. It's
I
Xavier Rudd. Yeah.
Yes. And it was called Spirit Bird. So if you have a chance, listen to that. Listen to it where you got some good bass, because it got some good bass in the song. Don't do it off a computer. But um, I just remember I just got up and I just started dancing,
Mm.
like just the slow dancing and just movement of body. And I felt this other release of energy, but instead of the release of like pain, how it was the day before of like hurt
Yeah.
and pain, it was this release of like stepping into my power and stepping into who I am, who I'm called to be, what my actual purpose is, because there is a purpose outside of just my like the creativity piece. I feel like my purpose is creativity is how I reach people in my purpose. Um, but it felt like just this overwhelming step into my purpose.
Wow. So that sounds like an interesting way to do a reset. It sounds like it was a multi-day.
Oh, we were there
experience.
for 7
Wow,
days.
7 days.
It was 7 days.
Wow.
Yeah.
How long ago did you do
Yeah.
it?
This was last year.
Last year. Wow. So I have a
Yeah.
good friend of mine whose son graduated NYU um, in psychology, and he has a psychotherapy practice now in New York, exactly around plant-based medicines. So
Hmm.
um,
Yeah.
it's
Look, I'm looking for some microdosing.
it's interesting because it is a lot more mainstream than it was in the past. And,
Hmm.
just my little Googling here as we're talking, there's a lot of
Yeah.
studies that show for PTSD, for depression, anxiety,
Yeah.
that there's a lot of evidence that that works. Even,
Yeah.
you got Ozempic out there now that, you could do some plant-based medicine and probably fight those urges for appetite and alcohol and
Mhm.
all those other things as well. Right.
There were some people who were there who actually were addicts
Mm-hmm.
who came to do plant-based medicine because it does the same thing as like EDMR. It helps to reset the neural
Yeah.
pathways. It just does it a little bit more quickly, where it has been known to break addictions for people. And so, yeah, I think that one thing I learned about it, because, again, when you read some stuff on it, there's these different things like, oh, but I saw this and it's dangerous. And, so the reason why it is classified, I think, as a Schedule 1 drug in the United States is, well, one, it's not a drug. It is a medicine, because drugs are manufactured. But The reason it's scheduled as a Schedule 1 drug is because they can't manipulate it to get the same effect in everyone. So that's one of the things
Right.
how I said the shaman said it doesn't give you what you want, it gives you what you need.
Mm-hmm.
If everyone's need is different,
Right.
it's you can't control what that outcome is going to be for them. The second thing is the only way that you can get it in the States is it has to be through you have to deem yourself as a religious organization. So some people who want to serve like ayahuasca or plant-based medicines have to then say that they're a church,
Mm-hmm.
which then scares some people because then they feel like,
Right.
see, I told you
Then
so.
it's the cult.
But,
Right.
right. But that's the only way they can do it
Mm-hmm.
without getting arrested.
Mm-hmm.
But there are different shamans that do travel throughout the States, but I say look them up and vet them to make sure that they're actually, where did they study? Did they study from the places that this actually comes from? Where is it being prepared? All those
Right.
type things. And then the last thing is you can't overdose on it. There's this thing of, you can overdose and people die on it. The only two ways people are going to die on this is if someone mixes the batch and adds something in it, or if you did not do what you needed to do, like get off of whatever medications you might be
Right.
on,
Right.
or
Yeah.
stop smoking.
Mm-hmm.
You got a lot of nicotine in your system and stuff like that, and you take it. But it will purge whatever you have out of you if it don't need to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And if you actually need it, because one time I got scared the second time that I went for that week, and I was like, oh my God. I looked at the shaman and I said, I haven't thrown it up. Is something wrong with me? He's like, no. He was like, if you didn't throw it up, it's because it's nourishing your body because it realized that you're malnutrition right now. So it's giving you what you need. And so I was like, okay. But yeah, for a while I was like,
Right. So wow, we've gone through
oh my
how
God.
long we've been on? We've been on about
I don't
an
even,
hour and 52 minutes. So
oh my God.
as we wrap up, this is a question that I always ask is, as you reflect back on your journey and your main turning points, what advice would you give to your younger self?
My first piece of advice I would say is trust your gut. Like trust it. It has never steered you wrong. Trust it. The second piece I would say is don't want community so bad that you start morphing into somebody who you can't even recognize, and that it's okay to walk alone at times.
Yeah.
And if I had one more thing, I'd probably say go a little bit easy on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes we put so much pressure on where we think we have to be at a certain point in time in our life. Like when you're 20, you are supposed to be like trying to figure out what you want to do and maybe struggling with identity and stuff like that. I think the best perspective that I got is like when you hit 40, you're literally mid-career.
Mm-hmm.
So why are you trying to be mid-career and you're 20? Why are you trying to run this hustle race that has the outcome of someone who's been 20 years ahead of where you're even at right now? Like they have 20 more years than you.
Right.
They're like on you.
Right.
So I think I would have taken some of the pressure off of myself.
I like that. I think you've got 3 important lessons there. Letita, I want to thank you for the conversation today. This has been a heck of a journey. I think there's a lot of life lessons in your story. I'm sure there's people out there who can benefit from it on so many different levels. We covered, perceptions, boxes, mentors, ayahuasca, depression, all types of issues. And I can't wait to see where you go next, right? When that album drops, I got to hear it. But thank you so much again. This is all about understanding people's journeys, trying to learn from them, inspire others. And I think your story is very inspirational. And I can't wait to see where it goes next. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yep. All right. Take care, everybody.